So the name of my podcast is the Big Questions Podcast, and every single guest I have, I always start with the same question because I think it's the biggest question of all. And I will ask you this question now.
Love it.
Who are you?
Who am I? Yes. That's a multifaceted question that I've been asking for a long time. And I've come to find that when I ask that question, I kind of find a still place within myself from which I seem to arise from, which I suppose could be my awareness or the experiencer. And I tend to find that that's the thing that is the same in you or the same in anyone, as I find it. But I do have an identity. I have to live a life. I have flesh and bone and all these things that you're looking at. And I go by Jeff. Jeff with one F to kind of clarify or as far as my channel goes. And I've lived a life, a lot of ups and downs, a lot of amazing awakenings, definitely some dark spots too. And I've definitely come to find that this whole thing has been a learning experience for me. And along the way, I've had some lights turn on. I've been able to see kind of what's going on in the room. And I've been trying to kind of like put my finger on it for really the last 20 years to in an attempt to answer that question that you just asked, who am I? A lot goes with that. What do I do? What is my purpose here? Why am I doing this? And those have been the questions, the big questions that have been at the forefront of my mind my entire life. And I would say, especially when I was younger, that kind of put me out on the fringe of most social circles because it really kind of stirs the pot or rocks the boat, if you will, of the collective narrative that most people have going on of you go to work, you go to school, you get a job, you do all these things, and that's how life works. And I was just like, well, wait, what about that? What about this? Where are we coming from? Where are we going? How do we fix this thing? Um, so I've just always been of that kind of nature. Always just honestly kind of like looking at this thing in front of me, wondering, is that?
Hmm.
Is this thing here in front of me? And I can remember as early as some of my earliest memories, literally as a child, were laying in bed, like opening one eye, opening the
Hmm.
other eye, looking at how the whole scene changes with each eye, just wondering, what am I looking at? Like not what is the bed made of or what is my room about or like that, like what the heck is this experience all about? And it was in my when I was 20, so pretty formative years, just out of high school and stuff. I had a light turn on, and the best way I can put that light is love. It was just like this great light turned on to me, and it happened in a conversation, much like this one, with a few of my friends where we were just kind of like circling around this spiral, asking these philosophical questions, why we're here and what we're doing and why do we do this and yada yada yada. And it just hit me. It hit me like an explosion of light and love is the best way I can put it. And it completely washed away everything that I thought I knew. And all I could see was like into this infinite horizon of love, light, bliss, infinite intelligence, harmony, where everything was just like connecting together perfectly. And it was from that point on that really sparked these questions. I mean, yeah, I got an answer then, but it only, inspired more and more questions. Like how do I deliver this to people? What do I do? How do I wrap my life around this? How do I integrate with this information and make it accessible? And so for the past 20 years, almost 18 years to be exact, I have been working on that. And in hindsight, I was working on that even when I didn't think I was, when I was having hard times and when I was forgetting, when I wasn't all there, when I wasn't paying attention. Even then, even then, I was forging something. I was working towards something. And it wasn't until about the last year when I finally decided to throw in the towel on corporate America and trying to fit into a job that I was like, I'm going to put all my chips in on this because it means everything to me. It means everything to me, this thing, love, you know? And I can see how it corrects everything, that it is the infinite harmony that exists here in the universe. And there's got to be a way that I can express this. So I started ramping up my writing. I started dedicating my time to this thing as though it were my job
Mm.
without knowingly getting paid for it. I was like, I'm going to focus on this as though it's just as important, if not more important, than any job I could have, and
Yeah.
I'm going to bring the best of myself to it. So I was writing and reading and down the line, my dad ended up helping me with a lot of this stuff. He is at a stage in his life where he's 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 almost via desperation seeking
Mm.
his spirituality because he's had some major surgeries that he's had to go through. He's had his lower spine fused together. He's had his knees replaced, and he's retired. And now he's like faced up against this thing. He's like, either I suffer or and take a lot of drugs and numb myself out of it, or I access a part of myself that I've been putting on the back burner and I move that to the front. And I'm like, I gotta find personal freedom right here, right now. It just so happens my son is all about this too. And I have a background of writing and putting together projects. He's a scientist by trade. So kind of like lending his abilities of discipline and skill in that in a very professional avenue towards what I'm doing too, but also granting an outlet for me to express myself. We kind of put our heads together and started to kind of approach this book thing like, how are we going to do this? And his advice is like, well, one way that a lot of publishers get their books out is by writing up an article or like a first chapter and then previewing that to a prospected, publisher, and
Mhm.
then getting it advanced towards a project. And as we were doing that, began to notice that it was almost like I was writing up a resume.
Mm.
I writing up a resume for myself and trying to explain this thing.
Yeah.
And, we were kind of having like some aha moments, me especially at looking what I was doing, what I was trying to do. And as I'm explaining all this stuff to my dad, he's like, man, we should be recording you. Like, we should be recording the way that you're expressing this because it seems to come out in the rawest form by the way that you express yourself. And I couldn't agree with him more. So from that point on, I started making a library of content and putting a YouTube channel together. So yeah, like if you look at my channel, some of the first videos are me just walking around in his backyard while he's filming. And we have like a creaky tripod and the audio is coming through a phone. But it started something. And also in doing that, I was drawing up diagrams. He told me, he's like, I'm a very visual learner, so it would really help if you could draw something up for me to look at and ponder. So I started drawing up diagrams of what I was experiencing. And I was going through a flip book or a sketchbook, going through all these pages, felt like a flip book. And that I was just like looking at all these different layers of the same thing. Like that's the same picture. That's the same picture. And then I'd look through my journals or I'd look through what I've written up and I'd be like, I am literally written the same thing on every page here. And I know that, but I couldn't quite like put my finger on it. And I had kind of an aha moment one of those days back earlier this spring, where I realized everything is the same thing, if that makes sense. And it was just that assemblage of words being put together. It was like it created a point inside my mind that allowed me to now funnel all information back upon itself
Mm.
in to prove the point that I'm trying to make, which means I could have any kind of conversation with anyone ever from any background and prove my point and validate that person in what they believe in the way they see things by simply showing them that it's all right now. And that's where I'm at right now. And
Mm.
this is me reaching out to a community of like-minded people and just offering my perspective, adding to the conversation, if you will. So yeah, that's kind of long and short of it.
Yeah, that's a good
That was a
answer,
lot.
man. No, man, it's good. And that's again, when I ask a person who they are, you can give a wide range of answers, but I like hearing the story, the summary, and then I can go back now and I can zero in on parts of what you just told me, and we can unpack it and go into more depth, if you get what I'm
Right
saying.
on. Right on. And I'm doing the same thing. I'm picking up your language and it's already piecing together, like some way I'm going to distribute an explanation back to you, like how you
Yeah,
just said zero in. What does that
yeah,
mean?
yeah, yeah.
Zero in. I think that's what meditating is.
Yeah, for
Zeroing
sure.
in.
Yeah, it's interesting when you start to like look into the meaning of words, like a word like understand, right? To stand under, to get under something. It's always
Yes.
penetrating into the heart of the matter. That's what we need to do. And a lot of the times we just go around the matter. We don't actually penetrate to the center of it. It's all about getting to the center of things, right? And you can't do that unless you're asking questions that most people don't think to ask. What you said about your big awakening experience, how it washed everything that you thought you knew away, that's exactly what happened to me too, brother. It was insane. It cast everything that I thought I knew under the microscope. It's like, oh, I don't know anything. I had to like basically start from scratch and start investigating things very like rigorously and without making any assumption that I knew anything. Like anytime I thought I knew something, it proved to be different than I thought. It proved to be the opposite of what I thought a lot of the times, which was very strange. But anyways, let's go back to your story here. You mentioned when we were talking earlier, I think that the area that you're living in is primarily a Mormon area from a religious
Yes.
background perspective. So, did you grow up in the Mormon church? Did you have any exposure to them? And if so, how do you think that kind of shaped and impacted your spiritual proclivities, if you will?
Great question. So now I was not born into a Mormon family. Just to kind of give you a background of the area I'm in southern Idaho or southeastern Idaho, and it's actually probably a higher per capita density of Mormons to everybody else in this particular region. Um, and that's where a lot of the population comes from. But there was also what really caused the population to boom back in the 1950s was a nuclear testing site
Hmm.
out in the plains, in the Snake River Plain of Idaho, kind of out in the middle of the desert. So that brought a lot of people from over in the East Coast, or you know that side of the country. My dad was working in Pittsburgh at the time. He's from Wisconsin, so he traveled on over to Idaho to work as a scientist. So um, and so I should say, him and my mom, they divorced really early on before I could even remember, back when I was probably one and a half or something like that. So I was immediately brought into a broken family in that sense. Not, yeah, I didn't feel broken to me, kind of a bad term, I think. But anyway, um, now they wanted me to have a higher education right from the get go, more than what public school was offering. So I immediately went to private school, and the only private schools in my area were Catholic or Lutheran. So I went to a Catholic and a Lutheran private school. So I immediately had Christianity anyway, shown to me every day. It was part
A
of the
form of
daily
it.
curriculum.
Yeah.
The daily curriculum was like, okay, now it's Bible study and all that, and then
Mhm.
on Fridays we would do mass. So I had an immediate interaction with church. My only other church experiences was with my grandma, who's still very practicing Lutheran. My mom was very um, Christian in the way that it kind of saved her life, because she had an alcohol addiction, and AA ended up getting her out of that. So a lot of the tenets of AA weigh heavily on the Christian tenets.
Okay.
But my dad was always a very scientific, analytical mind. He was open minded, probably I guess you could say agnostic, for the best part. He wouldn't really assign himself to anything. He was fascinated and open minded to all of it, but it's not like he was ritualistically practicing anything, except for maybe smoking a little weed every once in a while. But
Sounds
they
like a
were
wise
hippies.
dude.
they
Yeah.
they were hippies. Like they grew
Yeah.
up in the summer of love. That was when they were in their formative years, my mom and my dad. And so they were just kind of open, chill people that really didn't want to indoctrinate me with anything and just wanted me to do what I wanted in my life. So, I'm blessed to have that kind of upbringing. But an interesting part of that, my chair just dropped. An interesting part of that is, I went to private schools, but the public schools, since the population is mostly Mormon, they were basically Mormon schools. Like that was they had this little thing called a seminary right next to the building, and all your Mormon friends would go over there. So I started attending public school when I got into middle school, high school. But they would go right over there. Anyway, to backtrack a little bit, talking about how that kind of shaped me is, since as early as I can remember, I've been having these really big questions. And my parents are pretty open. My dad is very scientific. He was all about, seeing things objectively. He's a scientist. He's like, let's make sure we have all the pieces together. Let's not make assumptions, and be as true to this as possible to understand this. And he was teaching me a lot about all sorts of things. He thought I should know about the way the world works and the way that he saw it. And one thing I will say that both my parents taught me in a big way was being true, being authentic, and how important that is. But I would, pipe up in class in like Catholic school and ask questions that weren't getting answered, like or would be received by like conflict or defensiveness. Like I remember distinctly in like kindergarten getting in an argument with a bunch of the students and the teacher over whether or not Jesus could speak English. Like, like it, why was I thinking about this? Why was I talking about this? It's just because I needed to be satiated by asking these questions. I was just a curious kind. And I quickly came to realize as I grew up that people get set in their ways and they don't like to mess with that. They don't care to rock that boat at all once they're comfortable. So that was kind of the culture that I witnessed every time I would leave the house. And what I could see was like kind of a pretty clear divide, as you had your Mormons and everybody associated with that culture, and then you had your not Mormons, and they were typically more atheistic in a sense. I mean, they'd be Christian, but they just didn't care about all the rules of the Mormon religion, and they were fine to drink and do all these things. But as far as like my age group, it was like either you were hanging out with everybody and everybody's cliques, or you're a punk. And I was a punk. I was a defiant little brat. I was almost nihilistic when I was growing up. Like I just didn't give a shit. I just and that's just how I was up until that great big awakening that completely changed me. And that's when I realized, oh, I'm actually accountable for my choices, and the reason why I'm here is because of those choices. So I'm going to start attending to what I'm doing way more, and stop hiding behind blaming people and things like that. But anyway, it's like I had a lot of questions, and the world around me was not only not answering it, but were like attacking
mad at
me
you for asking.
even getting mad at me for even attempting to ask that. So it really kind of stoked that flame, if you will. And so I appreciate it. I'm actually really thankful for that. And I've got nothing really bad to say about the faith, their religion, or their beliefs, because along that way too, I should mention, I've met some really rather enlightened people in all these realms, in Christianity, in Mormonism, that really opened my mind to me, and like, oh, there is something here. There is something here, and you can catch the thread of it, and you can really find some beautiful, beautiful, lovely truth that can be empowering and good for everybody. However, it also breeds a type of a culture that is obsessed with its own image. And that image is what people get consumed by. And I can see that that's like a corruption that exists and is like interlaced into all these like happy, beautiful little nuclear families. But meanwhile, the kid who maybe happens to be gay wants to kill himself. And I'm like, well, is there any surprise? Like, no, not to me, because they're so upholding this idol of what they think their family and who they're supposed to
It's the
be
perfect
is.
word. It is idolatry for sure. That's exactly what I was thinking. Their image becomes the idol that they worship, and it's more important than the
Yes,
substance or the essence of what they actually
correct.
are, what they do,
Yeah,
right?
the truth, who they're
Yeah.
supposed like what, and so they hide that truth under a veneer
Hmm.
of of the perfect family life and the
Yeah.
perfect religion to be in and all that. And it's not just Mormons and
No,
it's
of
not
course
just
not.
Christians.
I suspect
It
it's a result of a literalist interpretation of scripture. And I feel like any religion that takes the scripture literally, like the earth is 6,000 years old and Adam and Eve
right.
really existed, and literally what the Bible says happened actually happened exactly that way. Those people, they always manifest a very superficial and outward facing faith, right? And I don't know what it is about that. My parents are Jehovah's Witnesses, and they're very similar. They're concerned about wearing suits when they go out in service. They longest time couldn't have beards. They have all these weird women can't wear slacks. They have to wear
Yeah,
skirts. Like
arbitrary, right? From the
and
outside looking in, it's like,
like it has nothing to do with spirituality, has nothing to do with being a
oh,
good person, has nothing to do with loving your neighbor, has nothing to do with any of the things that Jesus taught. It's completely
right.
superficial, irrelevant, and it's because they're focused on the wrong they look at it through a lens that doesn't make any sense, and it doesn't help. It just causes suffering. So as you said, there's these powerful truths in the scripture and in the symbol and in the myth of Yeshua that draws people in, and then the orthodox mainstream churches
Yeah,
distort and poison that beautiful truth. They weaponize it and they use it against people for the opposite reason that Jesus was there doing his thing. Jesus was there to free people and awaken people, and
exactly.
they use him to keep people more asleep.
Exactly. Yeah,
It's
yeah,
insane,
exactly.
right? It's insanity. And then when you
Exactly.
read scripture, like I read the Gospels, it took me 10 years to get to them. I read the Gospels and it was an amazing experience. It's like, holy crap. Like no wonder
Well,
people are obsessed with Jesus, with Yeshua. Like he was an enlightened master who studied all these different philosophies and mystery schools, and like people had to be initiated into these mystery schools to know what you and I know, to experience what you and I have experienced. It was an
yeah,
elitist thing. Jesus
it
took those
was.
mysteries and he came out and he tried to teach it to people in a way that they
Yep.
could understand, using allegories and metaphors that the common person could understand. He was the first person to do this. Before that, it was always elitist. It was like, wait, the average person didn't read Plato. They didn't, you know what I mean? They weren't reading
Yeah.
philosophy and like getting enlightened and like learning these things and questioning things. So it was like he was the first guy to actually came out and try and liberate as many people as he could. And they fucking murked him for it. Pardon my French. I do like to curse sometimes. They
Uh,
murked him.
it, please. Yeah.
Sorry.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No, I love it. I love it. It's being yourself, and that's what I would
Yeah.
hope to get.
Yeah. No one else
But
I can
yeah,
be, my friend. But yeah, anyway, sorry for the tangent. I've just
no,
been
it's. I
heavy
mean,
into
it's
it for a while, and it's like,
no
holy
reason to
crap.
apologize. It's absolutely true. I mean, it's like, why, if you're going to read the Bible, why look at all the rest of it? You could literally just read what Jesus says and be
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah.
Like the rest of it is just going to add to all this mental baggage and self vilification. Like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm a sinner. I'm
Yeah.
not good
Born
in the eyes of
sinner.
God. I gotta,
Yeah.
it's like all that stuff is not what Jesus was expressing.
No.
That was what the interpretation of the people that were, you know, honestly selling the book,
Mhm.
selling that view. And there's just so many people that had their hand in that,
Oh
from
yeah.
the Romans
Yeah.
and so forth. I'm sure you probably know way more about that subject than I do, but
Oh,
you can see how it was entered into a business
yep.
structure, and
Yep.
those business structures did not follow the same tenets or beliefs or values that were actually being handed to us by Jesus.
Yeah.
They shaped it in their own way so that they could amass control and get more
Yep.
and more people to follow and believe and pay up.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's wild. It's just like if more Christians read the Bible, I think it would change the world. You know what I mean? If more Christians focus more on what Jesus taught and what he did and what happened to him, right? The focus is always on like he walked on water, he turned water to wine, he died and came back to life. Okay, that doesn't make sense until you actually understand what he was teaching. When you understand what he was teaching, then all of those deeds and all of those acts fall into place and they reveal this kind of like complete picture. And but most people just focus on like he died and came back to life. He's perfect. Again, it's an external thing. He's perfect. Like perfect
Right.
how,
And
right?
he's something out there.
You
Like
can't,
he's
yeah.
something separate from me that that I now thus then put on a pedestal,
Yeah, yeah. But
and
can't
I'll
reach.
never be I can never reach it because
Exactly.
everything I've ever done is steeped in sin. And
Yeah.
it's like, man, it that's just what somebody taught you. That's just an interpretation of a teaching that has been filtered through so many different perspectives. And
Hmm.
where is it really practical in your life? How is it helping you?
Yeah.
From what I can see, it seems to be just causing more and more suffering. And then that also kind of like in a weird kind of like a masochistic way, validates people suffering, so they feel like they're supposed to
Yeah.
suffer to get to the greener pasture,
Yeah,
or
totally.
the holy place. Like,
Yeah.
no, that actually is right here right now, and this is what we've entered into. It's you telling yourself otherwise why it looks that way. And there again, that's where in everything that I do, in all of my endeavors, what I aim to do is redirect your attention and mine back to the point of conception, which is right now. This is where
Hmm.
it's happening. This is where it begins.
Yeah.
All the time and all the history and everything that is other than this now exists in a non-physical virtual format. And that can only arise through story or through us thinking about it and
Yeah.
talking about it. But really, all we're really like viscerally actually feeling is right here, right now. There's and it's actually unfathomable to really take in all of what's happening right now, from the inner workings of all your cells, and the miles and miles, millions of miles of blood streaming through your veins, and the way that the light is hitting you, and all the photons and all the molecules and everything that makes up this moment is quite unfathomable.
Hmm.
And and it's always there. It's always happening. It's happening before you think about it. So, and that's because it is right now, and that there's nothing newer than now.
Hmm.
It's literally in front of you. It's always first in line. It's first before all of us, even all of our stories of everything, of all of the masters, of all of that
Hmm.
now actually comes first. That's right now. And when you think about it in that kind of perspective, and you begin to honor what you have right now, and become grateful for it, then that by proxy affects everything that's in right now, because you're in right now.
Hmm.
Whoever may be listening is sharing this right now. um, the people in your life are in you right now, and we share that. We all share that. My right now and your right now are actually the same thing when we're together.
Hmm.
And then, but it's also kind of like, in a sovereign way, our own right now
Hmm.
in our own space.
Yeah.
But it's where we make our connection, and it's where we all link together, and it's what we all share that bridges all creed, class, gender, all of those things, all of the possible perspectives, species, all of it is all completely cut right through all of that. It's all just right now. And this is the great landscape for which we experience existence. If you could think of it like that, then you can always return to it, because it's
Hmm.
always with you. It's always there with you. And what you're doing is reclaiming your power. You're taking your power back. So a lot of the ways I'll put this too, and again, I will keep coming back to this. I'll keep coming back to this. It's like you think of your attention. Wherever your attention going is like your little mini now. But there's this great now, this like great field before you, that is like the big now that's always happening. And that's, you look at it, you see it in nature. You see it when you zoom in with a microscope. You see it in the vibrations of all the molecules. There is this like blossoming effect. It's almost like fractaling out at you, like coming at you. And that is happening just so. It's happening in harmony without your involvement. And it's always happening before and after you do this life. It's still there. And your now it just happens to be where your attention is. And where you place that attention is in a sense what you're feeding, what you're nourishing. The energy of consciousness is pouring through your attention and entering into what you're holding your attention on. And that's what grows, whether it be a project or the dishes or a depressing thought. Whatever your attention on is growing. And the there's that saying, wherever attention goes, energy flows. That's what it is. And
Mhm.
that's the thing that each and every one of us only has control over. That's the thing that we're controlling. It's just we have beliefs and ideas and concepts that we've given so much meaning because of our attention on it, that it now these thought forms have their own gravity, if you will, and
Mhm.
they pull you out of right now, dividing your attention from what's happening right now into a thought form. So you become distracted, if you will, distracted from what's happening right here before you. We say, like, give it your undivided attention.
Mhm.
That's the full breadth of your attention on a thing.
Yeah.
It's the moment you start thinking, the moment you start projecting into time is when you divide your attention. So again, that's where I call right now is one. I don't know if that is reverse on yours on the screen,
No, I can see
but
it.
all is just one thing, and it's just right now, and it's always the same thing. And that's where consciousness, as your awareness, as you, the observer, the witness of your life, that's where it rests. So all forms of meditation are eventually leading the attention back to what's right here before you. And with every passing time that you decide to bring your attention back to here, whether it be paying attention to your breath, or cueing your attention back to, oh, that's just a thought I'm having, I come back into the moment, or listening to beautiful music, or enjoying a funny movie, or whatever it is. When you're in the now right here, it it takes down all of this mental suffering that you normally are habitualized to go through, and it allows you to just be in the moment. And this is often experienced as what we would call flow state, right? You've experienced it just as everyone has, because you can experience it in any field, in any place. You can experience it while reading a book, where you forget how much time has passed, and or you forget that you're turning pages. You forget that physical activity is happening because you were there.
Yeah, the mind when the mind is out of the way, you merge with the moment and with what you're doing, and so you become the activity. You're not Oliver writing, you become writing, and that's why you lose track of time, because the self just fades out and becomes transparent, and then you can be completely
Right
immersed
on.
in the moment, in reality. That's
Exactly.
my understanding
Exactly.
of flow states, and there's certain ways you can trick yourself into achieving these flow states, right?
Yeah.
Mihaly's book was fantastic, and it
Sure.
reminded me of Taoism. In Taoism, there's a concept that's called Wu Wei, and it means not doing, but it's not
Oh,
sitting there doing
I have
nothing.
a notepad with that, like somewhere
Yeah,
around here, with that
yeah,
written on the top,
yeah,
and what that means.
yeah.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
doesn't
Not
mean
doing.
doing nothing. It means this thing is doing nothing. You could be very active in the midst of great activity, but internally you are centered in the now. Which I think when you
Exactly.
talk about the now, the point being the now, I call it the center, but that's where the now is. It's at the intersection of space and time. So
Yes.
really,
Exact.
right?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
That's it. So
The
I think there are different
convergence
ways. And
or
so
the
what you
axis.
yeah, exactly. Precisely. And so the cross to me, that's what it symbolizes. I co-opt religious symbols for
Dig
my
it.
own design and purpose. But what I was going to say is, it sounds like what you're trying to do by creating these diagrams, by creating this content, is you're trying to lead or show people how that they can find their own center and the now, which is their home, right? I call it the eye of the
Yes.
storm, because your mind could
Love
be
it.
sweeping cattle around in like a barn in it, but if you're in the eye of the storm, there's nothing. It's perfect
Calm.
stillness, right? Yeah, it's the center. That's where everything converges and everything emerges, right?
Right
David
on.
Bohm calls it, he says the universe is constantly outfolding and infolding, and it's happening at the same time. As it's outfolding, there's parts of it that are infolding, that kaleidoscope image that you gave, right? And the crazy part is we're that. You're not
Yep.
separate from it. You are that. You are that kaleidoscope, a part of it, unfolding and unfolding right
Yep.
now.
And all of your thoughts and anything you can think about and all the
Absolutely.
images and your imaginings are like riding the tides of that tapestry
Yeah.
in and out of this like infinite holographic space that is ever pervasive and betwixt everything we're experiencing that we think is physical reality.
Yeah.
They're completely intermeshed with each other, completely interlaced. And as you put it, the vertex, the apex and axes and origin point, if you're talking mathematics,
Yep.
is at the center, and that's right now. And you could see that perhaps as like a filament of energy that makes you up, that's at the very center of your being.
Mm.
And what do we also call this core, if you will? The heart.
Mm.
That's the heart. That's where we come from. That's
So,
at the beginning of us.
so is the
Go ahead.
now, what's the relationship in your sort of framework or in your mind between the now and love? Because we're talking about the heart being the center.
Same,
We're talking about the now. Okay,
same
yeah.
thing.
We're
Same
we're talk
exact thing.
we're talking the same language, sir. I just wanted to
Same
double
exact
check.
thing.
Yeah, correct.
It's
Yeah.
just the reason why I lead in anyway, talking about and calling it right
Yeah.
now, is because it cuts through any kind of association that you have with it. Most people just think of right now as a point in time. So I'm here calling it something completely different, calling it actually the thing that always
Outside of
is.
time. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Time doesn't happen there.
Yeah, it generates time. It creates time, like you were saying, right? Time is a property that blooms out of it, but it's not, it's in the now. It's not outside of the now. Past and future exist in the now. There's no other place for it to exist, right?
Exactly, exactly,
Yes,
exactly. That's
yeah,
all a play of the mind.
yeah,
But it is also love.
yeah.
And the reason why it's love, the reason why I called it love, or why it came to me as love, was because that was the only word that I could find in my language that best described what love really is,
Mhm.
which is unconditional, meaning there's no conditions to this thing. There's no but this. There's
Mhm.
no it has to be that. There's no limit. There's no boundary to it. It is the great unlimited. It is the great allowing. It allows everything to be what it is. Just as that saying goes, a face only a mother could love. Because a mother unconditionally loves their child.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter what they do. And despite how much they could hurt them, they're still gonna love them because love allows for all of that to even happen in the first
Mm.
place. Therefore, love needed to exist for everything else to exist because love allows it to exist in the first place, if
All
that
right.
makes sense.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
that is the same thing as right now, that it's the same thing. It's just, again, there we come into the challenge of using our semantics to try and describe this thing, because when I say love to you, you get it. You know what I'm saying? And I'm
Yeah.
sure a lot of your listeners know are right on point. They're like, yep, we're talking about love here.
Yeah.
But there's people out there that have associations tethered to love. And what they think of love is pain, is loss,
Mhm.
is all of those horrible things that can blossom out from this great spectrum of all possible experiences
Yeah.
that love allows to exist. And they just can't make that connection. They can't say,
Mhm.
what? No, love can't be everything because I was abused as a child, like that just doesn't compute.
Right.
So that's where I'm like trying to kind of approach it from a new angle and say, well,
Yeah.
it's the thing in front of you, but it's also love, and it's also the truth, and
Yeah.
it's also harmony, and it's also the universe, and it's also consciousness, and it's
Yeah.
also, it's all of those things encapsulated into one total thing
Mm.
that really has no word.
No, that's the
And
key.
yeah,
When you experience it firsthand, any word will do. All the words that you listed are just fine with me. I know exactly what you're talking about,
oh man,
right?
and there's so many. I mean, Darshan, Nirvana, like
Yeah, yeah,
the Dharma.
yeah,
Like it's called so many different, the Tao.
yeah,
Like it's called so many different things by so many people. Heaven,
yeah, yeah,
God. Okay,
yeah, yeah.
Yeshua.
Hmm.
I mean, Jah.
Yep.
all of it. Like Jehovah, like all of these things are just all pointers at this
Correct.
thing that's actually right in front of you.
Yeah, and that you can experience
Right.
firsthand. You can immerse yourself in it. You can feel yourself as it because you are it. But most people are looking out there for something, and it's very interesting. And not to like go back to Jesus too much, but he even tells you,
Please.
he says, the kingdom of God is within you. Where does the king live, my friend? He lives in the kingdom. God is within you.
Right
It's not
on.
this
Yeah.
external thing. Like, think about it. So it's interesting to me. But so you're basically pointing people to go within themselves, find this place within themselves where they are the now. And that's, in my experience, where the love that you're describing, that's where it flows from. So, like you were talking about different, different types of love. The Greeks have like seven, I think, words to talk about love because they break love down in like different categories, right? But the highest form of love in the Greek language is agape, which is
I
uh,
love it. I was that's the word on my
yeah,
mind. You just took
yes,
it right
yeah,
off. I'm
dude.
telling you.
And the word agape to me means love without object, okay? Most
Hmm.
love, when it enters from the transcendent field where it is all things, it enters this material sort of illusory realm, and it's still here, but it becomes I love you, or I love my
Right.
job, or I love
It
my
becomes a
car.
relationship. It's
Love
2 points.
with an
Right.
object. It always has an object. But when you
Yep.
experience agape, which is what I suspect you experienced when you had your first big awakening, it's certainly how I would describe my
Certainly.
awakening experience. It was a type of love that I had never experienced before, but that type of love is the source of all other loves. All other loves are just watered down versions of that sweet, sweet agape juice, baby. If you can
Yes,
get to the
sir.
center, you can tap that well, baby, and just
Drink
like
it as much as you want
share it,
forever.
share it.
Oh,
Put it
that's all
out
you
there,
want to do.
baby.
That's all
Yeah,
you want to
that's
do.
it,
Like,
man.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. And that's where I'm like, here's the well. It's right
Yes.
now.
Right.
I'm telling you, it's
Love it.
right before you.
Yes, I love
Um,
it, dude. I love what you're
and
doing.
I love that you said the word agape. I actually had this very same conversation with a great friend of mine, one of my confidants, life coaches, if you will, that's really been mentoring me along this whole thing. And he brought up agape. And I thought, well, isn't that interesting? Because when you look at the English word agape, it means open, just open.
Yeah.
It is the great opening.
Yeah.
There's no closing, there's
Interesting.
no shutting down. It's
Hmm.
just open. And
Yeah.
that's what love is. That's what love
Yeah.
is.
It's
It
it's a
just
difference between
is.
like a floodlight that lights the entire room up and a flashlight that you point at something. You say, I love you, and you point the
Yes.
love flashlight
Yes.
at them. But the what it sounds like what you're trying to do, what I certainly try to do is live my life with my heart wide open so that it's that floodlight effect. If you're in the room with me, you're gonna feel it. I'm gonna hug you.
Oh, I
You're
feel it
gonna
right
feel
now. I
the
feel it right
yeah.
now.
But I don't know how it translates online, but I'm glad you do because that's the whole purpose of this journey is to get like I spent a lot of years on this path, like looking into all kinds of different things. And then it kind of led me to this place where it's like, oh, it's actually just all about now. It's all about love. It's all
Yep.
about being
Yeah.
centered,
Look
staying
no
centered,
further. Look no
and
further.
yes, sowing the seeds of
There's
love
nowhere to
everywhere
go.
you go, right? Yeah, that's all you got to
Yeah.
do. And you have an infinite source of it. You never run out of love. It's crazy. I have three kids, and after my first kid, I was like, how am I going to love another human being as much as I love this person? It's like, oh, I just got an extra heart, and then I had another heart because I got three kids, and it's like they each have their own infinite resource of love in me. I'll never
Yes.
run out of love, right? So it teaches you
Never.
that love really is infinite. It really
Yep.
is
It is.
limitless, right? I
It
mean, when
is.
when you experience it in this pure form, it's like, wow, like it cures anything. It's a miracle. It's crazy.
Well, so talking about that flashlight you were talking about, that analogy of the flashlight and the floodlight. So like how I see it is the flashlight is your attention.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you're shining that light wherever your attention's going. Some things you don't want to shine it on, but you're doing it anyway because you're so habitualized to do that.
Yeah.
But no matter what, that light is shining on that thing and it's growing it, it's nourishing it, even if it's not what you intend, even
Right.
if it's I hate this and I'm going to focus on this because I hate it. Well, you're actually feeding it the nourishment of like pure love through your attention.
Mhm.
Attention is very powerful, most powerful thing.
Yeah.
Um, and I'll get into that later. But so we have a flashlight here. You could think of getting into the now or meditation, prayer, immersing yourself into the moment as turning that flashlight around back at the source of the light where the light's coming from.
Interesting.
It's like
Yeah.
shining back up into the light at the floodlight behind it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so you see what I'm saying.
Yeah. Yeah.
And but that also, what that does, and why meditation can be troublesome for a lot of people who first approach it, they'll get anxious, they can't sit still, they get up and move around, is because what they're doing is they're bringing their consciousness, they're bringing their attention back into a state of harmony. And so it's naturally causing what's not harmonic, what's discordant in your beliefs and in your mind, to bubble up, to
Hmm.
immediately rise to the surface. And with that comes all of the defense parameters that we put in place that cause us to fear that and avoid that. And
Right.
so it's like, no, I can't sit still. I got to go do something, or I got to go have another drink or another smoke or something like that.
Yeah.
And so it's, you see how that, makes it so difficult to just sit still and be in the moment, because that is actually where harmony rests. And unfortunately, a lot of us, well, really all of us, as we're brought into this life, begin collecting false information from a lot of people about how this world works, what love is, what God is, what Jesus means, like what all this stuff is. And all we're getting is like convoluted, disconnected, disorganized constructs that other people have slapped together based on their communities and their cultures. And they're handing it to you like, all right, join the club, go pay your taxes. This is what you got to do. This is what life's about. So we're all faced with this conundrum as soon as we come into our life. And then we actively participate in building it up as we create our identities. And then by the time we get to high school, man, it gets difficult. And, it's like, man, we should all just be grateful for the fact that we're not in high school anymore and we made it here. But you see what I'm saying? It's like that's the natural harmonizer, and it always exists right here before us. And if you take time to do that, that is just one activity you could do, like meditation, that will begin to build the muscle, if you will, of harnessing your attention. And you will gain greater agency over where you put it, greater awareness, because you're casting that attention back into the awareness. Here's the way I put the relationship between awareness and attention, if you will. So your attention, if you think of consciousness in its purest form, as that's what you are, okay, not just the mind, that the mind is experienced by you as consciousness, that you are consciousness. And if it came down to two primary functions, it would be attention and awareness. Attention is where awareness focuses in. It focuses into a point at something. Awareness is when attention disperses out to a field or a space. Now, these are both aspects of each one of us. We have both of these all the time.
Yeah, they're both happening all
And
the time.
all the time. When you start participating in the direct conscious act of doing some form of harnessing yourself, whether it be focusing on a candle or focusing on nature around you or immersing yourself into a lover or something like that. When you pour your attention into that thing, it's what happens by effect is the attention and the awareness converge. And that is growing the bandwidth, if you will, of your attention and the amount of potency that your creative energy has. So you're in a sense increasing the quality that you bring yourself to any given moment through any aspect of life, but you're also shining a greater light on that which you could be aware of. So you're expanding your awareness and bringing greater clarity to that which you could be aware of, while also increasing your focus and your potency of intention.
Hmm.
So it's just another activity that anyone can perform in any way they see fit, and
Correct.
it's good for you. It's great for you,
Yeah.
and it'll help you sort that thing out. And when I say that thing, I mean that mind, all that baggage, all of those,
Your story, your
just the
narrative.
story, the
Yeah.
narrative, the I mean, your model of reality, your
Hmm.
model of belief, your body of beliefs. I heard it today as your schema.
Hmm.
your great scheme. I love it.
Yeah, your framework, whatever it is. Yeah, whatever you call it. Again, it doesn't really matter what you call it. Each one of us inherits something like this, a framework, a narrative, a schema.
Yeah,
And as you said, a lot of it's just handed to you and you don't really analyze it or critique it or question it. You just take it and run with it. And if you don't ever stop to question, you could just go on living your whole life according to this story that's not yours. It was
yeah,
written for you by lesser authors. And I think what you're saying is absolutely true. You got to take some steps to basically create space between awareness and mind. And I think meditation is the best way to do
exactly,
that. And there are many ways to
exactly.
meditate. As you said, I think flow states are
Yeah,
a form of meditation as well. You can
sure.
meditate while you're running, you can sit and meditate in a more
Yeah,
traditional way, but they all achieve the same trick, which is that awareness can now back away from mind and see the mind instead of being caught in the mind and caught with
right.
thoughts. And
Yes,
you're saying, sometimes your attention spotlight gets on a thought even if you don't want it to, right? It's kind of the same idea. It's like you're caught in the currents of mind. You're not in the eye of the storm. You're out there with the
in the
cows
storm.
and the
Yeah,
barn. And of course, you're not aware because you're just being swept around and you're just like, oh,
love
there's
it.
a
I love
cow.
that. I love
You know what I
that. Yeah.
mean? But when you withdraw
Yep.
into the center, then it's like, oh, that's a weird cat, the cow over there floating around. That's a weird thought. I wonder where that came from. I wonder what
Yeah.
that means, right? And you start to question your mind and your thoughts, but you have to create that separation first. And mindfulness and meditation, however you can do it, I think are the two best ways. And the best part is, like I said, you can meditate in any number of ways. There's so many ways to create
Yep.
distance from mind. So,
It doesn't matter the path you take, just as long as you take the step, you know,
mhm,
yeah, there's beaten paths out there and you can walk them if you want. But at the end of the day, it's your own path. It's
yep,
gonna be your own path. You got to walk it. And
yeah,
I, in a way, I've answered the question. I kind of think of the difference because I've been asked, what's the difference between religion and spirituality? To me, spirituality is the personal path. It's
mm,
between you and the experience you're having, you and God. That's your path. Religion is the path of the group. That's the paved path that a lot of people have taken. But each one of those people that are part of that group are on a spiritual path.
yep,
And that path doesn't necessarily follow the same rules of the road as we see, that a lot of people aren't following those rules anyway.
mm,
But ultimately we're all on our own path. And a lot of what gets in our way on our path is assuming that somebody else's path is ours. and
mm,
and we see, oh, they made that work and I got to do what they did and follow their regimen to do it right. And when I don't do it right, then there's a part of you, an aspect of you, that cracks the whip on yourself, and then you experience more suffering in the
yeah,
moment right now. You don't feel good enough. You don't feel like you're doing the right thing. And it's just like this spiraling game as we lose ourselves in the storm of what the heck's going on and all this stuff. And that's where I'm like, well, just remind yourself that right now is what you got. And hey, maybe it isn't the best right now, but there's so many things to be grateful for that are so easily taken for granted. I mean, especially living over here in the Western world. I mean,
yeah,
if you got a roof over your head and food to eat in the fridge, man, you're doing better than most people. You're
yeah,
doing better than a huge majority of the planet right now. But there's just so many other things that we just don't even consider, like how well our hand functions or how well our eyes work if you have
yeah,
good eyes, or the supercomputer that we all carry around,
yeah,
like these
totally.
things are incredible, man. There's just so much to really take into light. And this really kind of shined on me today and I loved it. When you are grateful, you can't suffer. they,
Mm,
they can't exist in the same place. You can't have an anxious thought while you're grateful, while
mhm,
you're being thankful. They just don't exist together. And when you're being grateful, it's reverberating out to the world. It's you're putting that energy, that vibration out into the universe, and it's responding to that. Right now is responding to you at any given moment.
Hmm.
And you can see it in you can see it in like psychology or neurology. They call it the RAS, the reticular activating system. Like when you say get a new car or something like that, you see that car all the time now, like
Hmm.
because it's on the forefront of your mind, and now unconscious to you, you're kind of looking for it. Well, the same thing occurs when you take time to be grateful. You start to seek out things that you're grateful for, and it just arises. So to take it down another path, just real quick, and I'll let you talk. Um, if we're talking about the law of attraction, right? Put the energy you put out comes back to you. So I was thinking, well, what if you wanted fortune? Then be fortunate. If you want grace, then be graceful. It's in all those terms that we use: grateful, graceful, thankful, um, uh, uh, fortunate,
Careful is a good
lucky.
one too, full of care, right? I mean, I think
Care, yeah,
that's a good word. And I don't think most people mean it that way, that they're full of care. They're more like, gotta be careful. But I like looking at it that way too. It's like I care for everyone. I care for a lot of people. I'm full of care, right? So but
yeah,
again, this is the beauty of words, right? You start to unpack them and you
absolutely.
start to look at them differently, and it's like, oh, there's so much there, and it's just a sound, it's just a mouth sound, so
Oh
rich and
yeah,
many
no,
layered. But listen, I could talk to you for probably around 5 or 6 hours right now, and that would
you
just
can
be
tell,
part
you can
one.
tell.
No, 100%. I could just keep going all night and then probably do it again. But what I think I have
Well,
to do is I have to go put some of my kids to sleep. And
I understand.
what I will say to
Yes,
you, sir, is I would like to keep doing this. And I think that
please.
we should set up a time with Gary as well and do maybe the three of
Oh
us
yeah,
together because I think that would be
cool.
fun. And we have the same kind of thing going where it just flows naturally. You don't have to think about anything. And that's a form of meditation too. My mind isn't involved.
Absolutely.
I'm like completely immersed in what you're saying. And then when I'm talking, it's just coming out. I'm not like thinking about what I'm going to say. It's just this, we're in the
Yeah,
present moment and we're having this kind of energetic exchange, this interaction. And I don't know. I love it, man. It's great. So I'm glad to have met
it's
you.
actually the way I see it is it's a form of channeling. What we're
Mm,
doing is actually channeling. We're just channeling who we are. We're just
mm,
channeling, some might call it the higher self
yeah,
or the greater self, or I like to more term it as like the true self, which
sure.
would be just the whole thing working together in its full integral format.
Yeah,
That's how
yeah,
getting into right now, that's how it should work, I think,
yeah,
for all of us. And it feels best. It comes off naturally, and I think it has the best effect for you and me and for anyone that could be listening. And that's again why I'm so grateful that you reached out to me and that
yeah,
we could
brother.
have this back and forth, because I knew that we were going to hit it off. So
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah. Well, again, I think if, we all speak the same language. Like it's really quick to know whether someone is just again, not to judge, but whether someone is aligned with you or not, whether,
yeah,
they're on your vibe or not. Not to say better or worse or I'm right and
no,
they're wrong, but like I'm just looking for people that resonate at the same frequency, right? So that we can amplify what we're doing. And,
exactly.
you might use different vernacular, different language than I do. You might come from a different background and stuff, but as long as we're on that same wavelength, it doesn't really matter. That's just the accoutrement, the seasoning. It's like you got some pepper over here, you got some paprika over there, but the dish is the same. We're serving up the same soul food, my
Yeah,
man. So it's like,
absolutely,
so let's find the
absolutely.
others. But yes, we'll do this again. Thank
Yes,
you very much for your time and for sharing parts of your story, and we'll talk soon.
the pleasure is mine.
Yeah, cheers, my friend.